Wonderful. Can you hear me if I talk without a microphone, or does the recording need a microphone? Can you hear me at the back without it? Yes. Oh, bless you. Sorry. More for the recording, don't worry.
Sorry, my dear. No.
Is it better if I talk? No, it's not going to work with this. Okay. All right, I'm going to really ask if you don't hear me, as your voice gets tired and I'll slowly get quieter and quieter, just wave at me or do something if you can't hear me. Okay, I'm here for you, so if you can't hear, no point. Okay, so just slow us down. Okay, so I'm Lynn Katsoulis. I'm wear many, many hats. My main job is developing new medicines. The one I'm doing at the moment is to reverse aging, which unfortunately won't be ready by the time. It may be ready when I'm your age, but it takes a long time, but that is what I'm paid to do. I work in the US remotely for that, but I use that funding to fund my passion, which is biodiversity and minimizing our harm as humans on the planet. I have many degrees. The first one is in botany, second in botany ecology, botanical ecology, and that's really where my passion is. Unfortunately, studies took to what pays the bills, but thankfully it's paying what I really am on earth to do, and that's to protect it, to protect this magnificent gift that we've been given. And as a species, as humans, we are destroying it at the rate quicker than any other thing that's ever lived on the planet. So I'm a firm believer is that we have to understand it. We have to understand the intricacies, and it's through my pharmacology background. I have a PhD in pharmacology, where everything is about interactions. Everything, if you do this, that happens. If you do that, that happens. It's all about how the whole system works together. And it's those skills that I'm trying to translate to our magnificent planet, and to try and get all of us to use our intelligence to be able to minimize the harm that we are doing, but at the same time, while enjoying its magnificence. Okay, we don't have to not enjoy things to minimize harm. So the talk today is about biodiversity. And what took me along this route was, like you, I was a very keen gardener. I've always had a beautiful garden, and as a botanist, my focus was on plants. But I also own Happy Acres as one of the Beni hats I wear. For those of you who know, the Children's Environmental Center, and it's through teaching children and trying to ignite this love for nature in children and simplifying stuff that the obvious became obvious. And instead of me focusing now on plants, I focus on what the plants feed. I started my journey on, can you hear me now? Yeah. I started the journey with trying to look at, a living garden, when trying to bring children, I'm always looking for hooks to ignite this love for nature in children. And I initially thought it was bees, because everything's about the pollinators, and the focus on pollinators. So I got interested in bees and the diversity of bees. And through a gift, I was given Dr. Connell Erdley. He's the world's expert in bees. I worked very closely with him. We're trying to develop a poster to explain the diversity of bees. I don't know if you've ever seen those. There's a very popular poster that's around all the different bees that are in South Africa. I made that poster. And was through doing that I became very close to Connell, and when he moved to East London, he gave me his living collection of bees. Now suddenly I had to feed these bees. Not honeybees, the diversity or the solitary bees. And I had to start gardening for bees. And it changed my focus completely. My garden is more beautiful now than it was before I was looking at bees. But now I have a living garden. Yes, I got a garden full of flowers, but I now have the right flowers to feed the diversity of bees. And now my excitement goes way beyond a flower. It's wow, I've got a new species of bees. And then my interest just exploded to the huge diversity, which is the basis of this talk. So if my pointer will work, we can move on. And it's not working because there's an error message here. No, something's not liking something. My computer has frozen. There we go. Okay, so let's go back in time. So I'd like to ask the question, the piece of ground that you're sitting on, what did it look like 100 years ago? Probably a belt with a bit of, probably a bit of grassland. 100 years before that, also probably disturbed, perpetrators and stuff had been through here, maybe probably not as many animals. 1,000 years before that, a grassland. 1,000,000 years before that, a grassland. And as we go back in time, it would have been, a natural system that was self-sustaining. And so it would have been like that for about the last 10,000 years. In the time when the world was in harmony, balanced. But going before that, until then, so until that time, until about the 1970s, till about the 1950s, so the last 10,000 years, till about the 1950s, the planet had become into a stable system. Before that, it was fluctuating a lot. Ice age, non-ice age, move. But slowly it had got to a stage where the world was blanketed in a diversity of plants. Why is there an echo? Where is this echo coming from? Can you guys hear the echo? Yeah. Sound engineer, there's an echo. All right, so this blanket of plants around the planet is what brought the stability. And it was this Earth's systems that then kept the whole planet in homeostasis, in a stable system. Along came humans and our ability to communicate and write things down, and we just assumed that the stability of the planet was always there. It's only as we're learning more and more and more through our historical records, the fossil records, and being able to interpret the data more and more with our more advanced tools, that we're now realizing it wasn't stable for very long. It was only in the Earth's history now, only about 10,000 years. And it was plants generally, and all our animals that kept the plants in balance, that had that difference. But since then, since about the 50s, as we in our ignorance have just exploited the Earth without any consideration of the harm that we're doing to it, it's since then that at an increasing rate, it's the human systems that are now dominating the planet. It's what we are doing that is now dominating virtually every single planetary system has been dominated by humans. Whether it be the water systems, carbon in the air, pollution, water currents, we're pumping out all the water out of the groundwater, we restabilize all our water systems. Every single planetary system is being changed by humans in our ignorance. But what we need to do, I don't think it's doom and gloom. If we can get as many humans as possible to understand more and more and more, and this is why I'm one of the few that I'm super excited about AI, because it's the first time in human history that we have an intelligent entity that can now combine all the disciplines, from whether you're a politician to a geologist to a whatever. It's one system can now come and integrate all the different intelligence systems and to come out with one solution. And there will be a solution. There will be a way that humans can live in harmony with nature without destroying the planet. If we can do it in a responsible way and have our decisions dominated by a collective good rather than a single person's bank account. And that is the biggest challenge. Okay, so if we go back, this is the Biodiversity Intactness Index. So basically we're looking at the biodiversity and how the balance between nature is intact still. The brighter the yellow, the more disturbed it is. If it's black, it's good. It's reverse of the normal scales. But if you look at South Africa, you can almost see our map, or you can clearly see our map by humans' interference. We have completely destroyed the biological systems in South Africa. And it's the same, and it goes with development. The more development there are, the more people there are, the more disturbed it is. And why does that matter? If you go to the World Economic Forum and you look at the top 10 risks to humanity, I'm not talking to the planet, I'm talking to humanity, to you and me and our descendants. Okay? What is the biggest risk to our species? Look how many of the top 10 are green, environmental. I always love driving along the roads to talk like this and trying to count the billboards that are anything to do with environment. None. It's an easy count. None. What is it all about? Every single billboard will be some product that is destroying the environment. Is destroying the five. It's actually destroying every single one of these. Every single billboard. The marketing and the financial systems are not aligned with what our species needs. And why does that matter? This here is the integrated, the size of the dot being the impact in the near future. Here's biodiversity here. But it's a web. If we knock out biodiversity, the whole lot is going to be impacted severely. I'm not just talking a little bit, I'm talking severely. To the point that your great-grandchildren probably won't have close to what you have. It's not a minor issue, it's major. Okay, and why does it matter? I love this talk, this saying by Thomas Leroy, where he says that biodiversity is nature's immune system. We always think of nature, and nature, what is nature? And with all due respect, as we walk in, keep our garden healthy. What's below? Keep our garden healthy. Poisons. Is that healthy? Is that a healthy garden? So nature, but that's our perception of nature. Flowers, without understanding what each flower does. But so the planet, so nature is the planet's life system, but it's biodiversity that's the immune system. And now I'll show you I do have a medical background. So what does it happen? So why does it matter if we have an impaired medical system? Immune system. What happens is you get infections. You see that with patients with HIV. Destroy the immune system, you get infections. And in our natural world, you get all the invasive exotics coming in, like infections. You also get cancer. Nature's corollary would be uncontrolled growth of what should be there. There's nothing controlling it. The biodiversity is gone. We get impaired healing. The whole system gets decreased resilience. Or you have an autoimmune system, and you see this in places where you destroy the biodiversity, where you destroy the balance. You get the whole system starts attacking itself. And it shouldn't be like that. There's no reason. If everything is interacting, it is magnificent. Where do you go on holiday to get peace and quiet, to listen to all the birds? To your neighbor's garden or into the wild? Why don't we bring the wild into our own gardens? We can do it. And we'll all be happier. Okay, so the way forward, I don't believe that we should, as many people do, and especially those in authority, just see this problem as overdaunting. And they sit back and say, and they lose it. So more than ever before, it's now up to us to move forward with responsibility, courage, creativity, and a collective resolve. We all need to be able to do what we can to be able to sit it. We must not go back and just defeat and say, exotics are taken over, there's no point fighting, whatever. No, I don't believe that. If we all join together and fight this collectively, we will be able to avoid it. Okay, so I'm going to quickly just race over some of the background, and I'm going to go into what you really are here for, and it's about the birds. So just to show you why you are important. This map here shows you all the protected areas. So in terms of the national parks in green, and the World Heritage Sites in orange. So every single protected area in South Africa, whether it be private or public, is shown in this map. Look how little of our country is actually being protected. Okay? If we superimpose that with where our problems are, where are we losing animals? So this map here shows you where animals are becoming more threatened. Animals being insects right through to anything that moves is not a plant. Okay, look where they're becoming threatened. And this is in 7 years. In geological terms, 7 years isn't even a blink of an eye. It's, a split second in terms of geological terms. But yet, this is the damage we are doing in 7 years. Look how these two match over. In other words, we cannot rely on protected areas to be able to preserve our biodiversity. It's not an option to protect garden and biodiversity in your gardens or in the local park or in the local open area. That is where we need to be protecting our biodiversity. And I'm not talking about lions and elephants and snakes. I'm talking about the insects, the birds, all the little things. Because it's the little things that drive the big things. Okay, so it's our responsibility to every single open space is to now use it for its benefit. And I always often look at areas where there's a house that's broken down, where something's been knocked, and they're waiting to develop it. What comes in those open spaces? Exotic plants. We have disturbed nature so badly that the moment you leave it, things that you don't want to take over. But if we all collectively used all those little open spaces to manage in the way they should be, we could have gardens full of butterflies and birds and dragonflies, bush babies, hedgehogs, lizards, chameleons. When last did you see all those animals? Okay, and there's no reason. So just to show you a bit more why it's the extent of our harm, this here is a map of all the biodiversity hotspots. In other words, areas where you get naturally, there have been extreme diversity. And I'm also president of Lepidoptera Society, the Butterfly Society. And I'm there because butterflies are a good indicator. Okay, these would be areas where you get a huge diversity of butterflies or birds or whatever it be. Look how they are not protected. Almost all our biodiversity hotspots are there for the construction and the farmers to destroy, or for the gardeners wanting to spray poison. Okay, this is another map of showing the extent of the problem. This here is all the butterflies that are either rare, threatened, or almost going on the brink of extinction. Each one is a different species. Did you know that? We've got about 56 different species of butterflies that are about to go extinct. And there's no noise in the media because the Lepidoptera Society is not making any noise. 5 fingers are pointing at me, okay? All right, we're trying, we're doing our best. Okay, so what do we need to change? We need a mindset of building biodiversity from the bottom up. And this is the obvious thing that came when teaching children, when you're trying to do it. Okay, so we all know that we need healthy soils. So I could give you a whole talk for a couple of hours just on protecting your soils. In a bottom line, from mimic nature, don't put antipoisons, fungicides, herbicides, everything. Don't go sweep your gardens. Every bit of dead leaf you go and sweep up and put it in your rubbish. That is your health of your soil. Go and collect, leave the leaves there, let them protect. Let your organic matter, as it does in nature, sit on soil. And that will protect. Many of your predators that will control your bugs are sitting in the leaves that you're sweeping away. So rather use nature's solution than one that's come from a pharmaceutical company in a bottle. Okay, nature's given you a solution, use it. Okay, so there, and we could give you a whole talk on that. After that, you get plants. And it's the species of plants that are dependent on what's here, will then depend what can live here. And I'm going to show you in the talk today that very few plants actually are eaten. Okay, and once we get the right plants over there, then the rest is automatic. Animals can move. If you can feed them, they'll come. So that is where we've got to focus. Most of our conservation programs, where do they focus? There. That's not where we need to focus. If we focus here, that will come automatically. You can have that. If you don't have this, that can't survive. So this is where our focus would be. And this is the enormous opportunity that nurseries and gardeners have, because you are controlling this. Okay, so I'm going to try and give you some information of how to put that. And that will bring your birds. That's how you bring your birds. So just to go show that you know this, what I'm telling you, oh no, but no one's actually clarified it for you. You know that herbivores are fussy. Okay? As humans, we are omnivorous. We have the broadest diet of any animal that has ever lived on the planet. We can cook our food, we can cut it, we can do whatever we want, or we can grow it. And we have a very diverse microbiome. through that, we have a very diverse diet. Can I go and leave you in your garden to live without a kitchen, without a spa, pick and pay, whatever? Will you live? Why do you expect birds to live? If you want birds, feed them. Okay. Make their pantry. Make the pantry for the bird the one that they want. Okay, and that's what I'm going to show you, how to develop a bird pantry. Okay, but just to show you that you know this, let's say you're a zookeeper, and I gave you 4 different packages of leaves to feed your animals that you got, and then I ran off. I didn't tell you what to do. You have to go now work it out yourself. Of these 4, what are you going to feed to your porcupine? Carrots. What are you going to feed to your silkworm? What are you going to feed to your koala? And your giraffe? What happens if I got it the wrong way around? The animal would starve. At least 2 would starve. You know it. You inherently know this. But we don't translate that into our gardens. Okay. I'll bet you, your porcupine, all of those, really couldn't care how many flowers you have. Okay, use that mentality for what you want to bring to your garden. Okay, so how are we working out what we need to put in our garden to be able to, and in nature's, into wildlife, to be able to feed the herbivores? So the way we are doing it is, me. I took this, the diversity of all the plants. That is a wheel of all the different, a pie chart of the species diversity of every living species, from everything. Okay, right from our protista, so our single cellular organisms, bacteria, cyanobacteria, all over there. Then we've got our fungi, and this is the proportion of life on Earth. Then all our plants fit in over here. Then we've got all our animals starting here. So from our ancient primitive animals, jellyfish and all of those, and coral, right through to our octopus and snails, our arachnids, and then crustaceans, and then insects. Did you know that 50% of all life on Earth is insects? Okay. And then we've got all our vertebrates, right from our deuterostomes, right from starfish through to humans, are sitting in this little bit. When we talk about protecting biodiversity, we are not talking about this tiny little dot over here that's talking about all our vertebrates, all our all the wild animals that dominate all our things. When we talk about protecting biodiversity, we need to protect the whole lot. Okay, and if we can protect the whole lot, then we will have, the Earth will go back to the stable system where we don't have to worry about what's going to happen in a couple of years' time. Okay, so what are we doing? So I looked at all the different herbivores. So grasshoppers tell you what they eat, grass. Not all grass, only specific grass. They eat about 10% of the different species of grass. But we know that. Then we've got our slugs. I don't mind where you get your plants from. You can, any nursery, doesn't matter where you go. You're going to get slugs. They're not fussy. We're not going to think about feeding slugs. They're generalists. They're going to be happy no matter what food we give them. Okay? Next being bugs. The bugs, the plant suckers, those that suck the plants and the juice, the xylem and the phloem out of the plants. Those are also, some of them are fussy, some of them aren't, but we don't know about them. They're so unstudied, I can't use them to tell me what plants to use. Even though they would be interesting, but we don't have the data. Then you've got all your different beetles. Many of your beetle grubs eat either dead plants or living plants, and some of the beetles eat plants, but again, we don't know much about them. We can't use them to tell us what plants to choose. Then you've got all your pollinators. Surprise to most people, pollinators are generalists. They want nectar and pollen. Not many. If they can get it, they'll take it. It's up to a plant to hide its pollen and nectar from certain pollinators. But the pollinator itself is not fussy. Give it pollen and nectar and it's going to take it for its babies. Okay? Nectar for itself, pollen for its babies. Then you've got your vertebrates, or your megafauna, so your birds and all your mammals. We've got a lot of data. Farmers over decades have been documenting what eats what. So fantastic, we've got that data. I'm using megafauna data to tell me what plants to put in. And then butterflies. As you know, the silkworms, and I hope all of you are rearing silkworms and are getting your kids and grandchildren to all rear silkworms. It's such an important message to rear silkworms and to see that whole magnificence of the different life cycles. But the butterflies, caterpillars, are the fussiest of eaters. And you know it with silkworms, for those of you who reared them. If you give them anything else, forget it, they die. You can give them beetroot and lettuce and maybe, but you won't get a second generation. You might get that lot, but its babies won't be able to have babies. Okay, mulberry leaves, species specific. 2 species of mulberries, that's all it can eat. And many of your caterpillars across all your moths and butterflies are the same. They are the fussiest of the fussy eaters. Putting it into a human equivalent, this is a guy that's allergic to gluten, cannot eat lactose, cannot eat this, cannot eat, and they come for dinner and you say, what am I going to feed you? Okay, those are caterpillars. They are the fussiest of fussies. So when you are having a dinner party, who do you decide the menu on? Do you decide it on that fussy guest or the young teenager who can eat whatever they want? Who do you do it for? The fussy. And that's the exact principle that I'm using in the system that I've developed. Let's feed the fussy eaters, and the generalists will be fed. And that's the basis of the whole system that I've developed to make a plant choosing system for dummies. You don't have to know plant names to be able to use the system that I'm showing you. Okay, so why butterflies? I've told you why they're fussy. They're really, really fussy, but they are also the purity of nature. Purity as in the baby food. If you had to keep a lion or a leopard or any of our other big predators on your game farm, what animals are you going to make sure that you have to feed them? Impala, daycare, you've got to, for your little ones, you want some daycare stuff for the babies, and you want some bigger ones for the bigger animals. And you're going to have to make sure that there's enough of, the buck to feed your things. You know that. What feeds baby birds? You all know the pictures. What feeds baby birds? Not worms. Have you ever seen a budgie digging worms out of the soil? What are they feeding? You know the picture. What are they feeding? Not worms. Caterpillars. Worms are not caterpillars. Caterpillars are baby moths and butterflies. It's caterpillars. They are and other soft-bodied insects. I have never seen a lark or a whatever, all the little birds that you want in your garden. They are not digging for worms. That's your hardy-dar and your African hoopoo, and those are doing that. But most of your birds are taking caterpillars to feed their babies, irrespective of if they are frugivorous or carnivorous or insectivorous. In other words, no matter if the bird adult is eating fruit, insects, or other carnivores and mammals, it feeds its babies soft-bodied insects, which is equal to grasshoppers and caterpillars. The very things that you poison. So when you spray poison in your garden, what you're actually doing is killing the food of your baby birds. And surprise, surprise, you cannot get adult birds if you don't have baby birds. Okay. So if you're going to not feed your caterpillars, so either have the wrong plants, because I already told you caterpillars are very fussy. So if you don't have the right plants to feed your caterpillars, you're going to starve your babies. And if you're going to spray poison in your garden, you are then giving poison directly to those babies. And you're actually poisoning the baby birds that are feeding, or the parents are feeding in your garden. I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but I'm just telling you the way it is. Okay, so if you can have the right plants in your garden, then you'll have nice fat juicy caterpillars that eat your plants and make holes in your leaves, and then they will then go and feed the babies. Okay. So how did we work out which caterpillars to get into your garden? So the caterpillar rearing group, which is headed by Herman Stauder, a phenomenal mechanical engineer turned entomologist, who goes out in the wild, and as citizens you can all contribute to this project if you want. Instead of killing your caterpillars, catch them, rear them, and you know, it goes way beyond rearing silkworms. I don't remember that excitement as a kid when your silkworms emerged to this ugly moth. The fun of rearing an unknown caterpillar and getting either an insignificant moth or this magnificent butterfly, it is an excitement. It really is worth the effort. And this is what Herman Stauder has done. And they've gone and collected caterpillars, reared them, and documenting photos all the time, documenting the host plant, the adult, the date, the location, etc. And then for those who are willing for their little pet that they've just now reared and love so much, if they're willing to sacrifice it to science, they then go and pin it, and it goes into the databases for the entomologists around the world to study. And that is how we've got the data. So in other words, the data that we built the system on is on empirical data, and the most robust data set that I think is available worldwide. Okay, and from that data, this is now the results. Okay, that represents 7,000 different plants. Okay, so not all the names are there. If you go and plot which plants actually feed caterpillars, you can see it's very, very heavily skewed towards the left. In other words, translating that into layman's language means there are very, very few plants that support the majority of Lepidoptera, moths and butterflies. So if you want to now, let's say you're a restoration ecologist and you want to now come and bring back biodiversity in a game reserve or the park, in your local park or whatever you are, if you want to now bring back what's here before humankind's disturbed everything, if you look here, it's 7,552, I'm sounding like Zoomer here, 7,552 different species of butterflies and moths feed on 2,000 plants. But if we take it down a bit, so half of them are fed by only 260 plants, and that's for the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. They're not just South Africa, it's an enormous area. So translating that, if you want to get 80% of your Lepidoptera back, it's only 5.5% of the indigenous plants in an area. Think about that. You can bring back 80% of all butterflies and moths by focusing on 5% of your indigenous plants. Turn it the other way around. 95% of the plants out there do not feed animals. When I saw that stat, I thought, is that translatable? I then started combing the literature for what herbivore, animal, of all that, my map there, of all the different species, that pie chart. That principle is true for every single group of animals. Humans, in terms of our medicines, that is ever recorded from going back from ancestors, going back to like last 500 years, where people have actually been, we haven't been writing for 500 years, but in the last 100 years, where we've been writing down medicinal plants, it equates to 6% of all the plants that exist. That 6%, 5%, 8% is consistent across all different animal groups. If we can lump them all together, we're talking about less than 10% of the plants, indigenous plants, feed animals. Less than 10% are eaten by herbivores. 90% of plants are not eaten, of indigenous plants are not eaten. And then we throw in exotics, and none of those are eaten. Okay, so let's turn this around. Let's say I want to come and restore biodiversity. If you're going to go and just choose plants randomly, you have to go and choose, this is for large areas, 15,000 plants to be able to get our biodiversity back. If we go and use the model that we've developed, you only have to focus on a small number of plants and you'll get full biodiversity back. Okay. So to try to translate this to every lay person who doesn't have the privilege of spending 20 years studying, to translate this into something that you can use, I've created a biodiversity support score. So the biodiversity support score is a composite index. In other words, it takes all the different data from all the different key processes within an ecosystem and puts it into one number. Okay, so in this biodiversity support index, I've said what the impact of the plant is on the soil. So mainly those that fix nitrogen obviously have a high score. If it feeds birds or megafauna, it also goes to a high score. Pollinators, high, and then the moths and the butterflies. So if a plant feeds any one of those, it gets bumped up to a high score. Okay, so no, I'm not developing a scheme just for butterflies and moths. What people misinterpret this. It's a score that brings life back into your garden, beyond pretty flowers. Okay, I love pretty flowers. I'm not downgrading pretty flowers. I'm saying there's pretty flowers that also feed. But like Hansel and Gretel, they go and they find this little cottage with a witch, and they can live in their cottage and eat it. That's the one I want. I want a little cottage that I can live in and eat it, because I don't have much space. Okay, and so we're choosing plants that are both the home and the pantry for the plants. Okay. So the numbers I've given you. So we've done a scoring system from 1 to 5. 1 being it's from a different biome, but it doesn't cause any harm. And it does actually feed. Many of our pollinator plants, our nectaring plants are exotics. And they're great. They're not invasive. We can use them. They're a 1. Okay? But let's start at the top. So if it's a number 5, it means it is eaten by more than 15 different species of caterpillars. It also may be a very good nectar or pollen producer for all our pollinators, and particularly those around the world, around the sea and around the country. Or it might have a very high palatable index for our herbivores. But you don't particularly want a zebra in your garden, so don't worry about the palatability score. Just feed what you want in your garden, okay? Unless you want a zebra in your garden, I'm not sure, maybe you do. Okay, so then we've got a 4, so it's 5 to 40 different species, and it goes down. For 3, it's only feeding 1 or 4 species of caterpillars, and these are the ones that the buck and everything will eat if everything else is run out. They will eat those in winter. Once the Smarties are gone, they'll eat the licorice. These are the licorice. Okay. Then we've got the 2. The 2s they are not eaten at all. Nothing eats them. Okay, but they're not useless. They are the ones that photosynthesize. They maybe form a habitat. These are the cottages that you can live in and not eat. So their habitat, their nesting areas. They make shade. They make organic matter for the soil. They still have a value, but they are not feeding herbivores. Okay? And then 1s I've explained to you. And then we've got the reds. So going right to the bottom, these are the plants that are doing harm. These are your exotic invasives that are moving in, and the moment that gets in your garden, in a couple of years' time, your whole garden is filled with that 1 species. Okay? That's your NEMBA category 1A and B. The government, by law, you actually are not allowed to plant these, but like many of the laws in this country, is not implemented. Okay? Then it's the -4 is your category 2, and the sort of less invasive, exotic invasive, but not minimally invasive, and then the exotics that are not invasive but are not eaten. Those are a -1. So I've given all plants in South Africa a score, and then So if you could just then go choose your plants by a score, and then know what it's going to do. And I'm not saying don't buy 2s. 2s are value, but just make sure that you've got the 5s in your garden, and let me show you why. So I'm transposing these scores onto Herman's sheets about the caterpillars. So if you choose a 5, it's sitting over here. It'll feed lots and lots of caterpillars, and be palatable, and feed the pollinators, and probably also the soil. And then it's the 4 that feed fewer, and then the 3 that 1 or 2 different species of caterpillars. Now let's translate that to all the different plants. This is just what's being eaten. So if we now go and move it to all plants, this is basically the ratio. So those 5s, 4s, 3s are sitting here. And then you got your 2s that are pretty, beautiful, photosynthesizing, capturing carbon, doing all of those, but they're not feeding herbivores. Okay? And then you got our -. And then this is the number of species. And it's so basically when we're gardening, we need to focus on the extremes. Okay? Get rid of those, plant those. If you want to have biodiversity back in your garden, if you want your birds. Now, saying which plants these are, but you don't need this now. Here's the top 10, but we'll make this data available to you, or the top 20, I mean. So many of them you see are trees. Tree, or shrub, ground cover. None of them are your little bulbs. Think of that as a caterpillar. If you were a butterfly, a nice big beautiful butterfly, where are you going to go and lay your eggs? On a plant that is this big, that your second egg, or not even the first egg that you lay on there, the caterpillar, by the time it's in the second instar, is going to finish that plant, is going to starve. Or you're going to go and lay your egg on a massive tree which can feed hundreds of your babies. Okay, it's not a mistake that your plants that sustain biodiversity are those going to be eaten and survive being eaten. Okay, so what happens over time? So if you go into a natural area before humans arrived, this would basically be the ratio of plants that would have been there. You've had a really small proportion of 5s, some 4s, 3s, and 80% would have been either a 1 or a 2. And let's say you go to Kruger Park, or Kruger Park's not natural, that's destroyed by elephants. But if you had to go, there actually are no places like this left in South Africa. But let's say you could go back in 200-300 years ago, you would have seen the ratio of plants would have been that. Now that's encouraging as a gardener, because it really doesn't matter. You can fill your garden with the most beautiful flowers. You can use this space for all those wonderful plants, as long as you have a few plants that are feeding herbivores. Okay? So if you can focus on that, by just having that, and then use the rest for whatever you want. But just make sure that that feeds your herbivores, and then you'll have a garden full of birds. Okay? And another thing, the way I like to look at that is make sure in the property that you are managing, that your houses and all your parking lot and all the place that is not sustaining nature fits into that. And then as long as you're reserving some area and a diversity of plants for nature. Can I ask all of you to look at your phones and put them on silent? And I think I've fit into that category too. Okay. All right, so then what happens over time? Now when you're planting a plant, you're not planting a pillar or a brick or something else that's inert and dead. You are planting a living organism that is going to be pollinated by the pollinators if you have the right plant, and then it's going to make seeds. So long after all of us are gone, those seeds that have been germinated and grown and had seeds and grown and had seeds. So when choosing your plants, I always say, think that you are not planting a plant. You are planting something that's living and is actually your legacy. Let's think, I'm not far behind all of you, okay? Let's say 20, 30, 40 years time. What's going to be where your garden is? Is anyone even going to remember that you lived in that house? No one's even going to remember you. Your kids are going to have forgotten you. No one's going to remember. What's going to be there? The trees that you planted. Your actual biggest legacy is the trees you planted. And either it's going to be an exotic invasive that's going to continue destroying that nature, or it's going to be a tree that's bringing back life into that neighborhood. My sister got divorced many years ago, and she yesterday she went back to the property. There's now divorce disputes, and she wants to go take the property back. And she had the most magnificent garden. She went back, the garden is dead. What's left? The trees that she planted. So focus on what trees you're planting. Are they the right trees? Because that's what's going to stay long after all of us are dead and forgotten. Okay, so what's going to happen over time? This is what's happening. If you have an exotic invasive, just one in your garden, come back in a couple of years' time, and that's what your garden's going to look like. Go to all these areas, these dead places around your garden. What's dominating them? Syringas, privets, jacarandas, mulberries, all the exotics. So when gardening, you have to be ruthless. You have to take out all of those, even if a seedling of an exotic. If it's in your garden, you take it out. So our focus needs to be getting rid of those and boosting these. So if we can do that, against bees, all this hype about pollinators. Who pollinates all these exotic invasives? Bees. The whole focus is on the wrong thing. It's not about bees. I always think it's about the laborers. Let's have a sales force. What's more important, our sales force or actually making a product that's worth it? The people are focusing on bees are the marketers. They're focusing on a sales force. The ones that actually make you sell and think. It's not about them, it's about the products. It's about this. So don't focus on pollinators, focus on the biodiversity sports course. That's what I'm trying to do. What feeds animals? And feed the right animals and get rid of these. If you want to focus on a pollinator garden, this is what you're going to have. And the whole of Europe looks like this. Okay? Let's focus on the right plants. So then I played with mathematical modeling to try and work out how many exotics do you have to get rid of to actually make a difference. I own a lot of property in Harrisburg, and we have a major problem with exotic invasives because our neighbor planted a forest of exotic invasives. And now it costs me an absolute fortune to get rid of these exotics, and I'm losing the battle. So I try to mathematically model what proportion of my exotics do I have to get rid of to actually make a difference. And I saw if you plan to get 10%, every year if you list to take 10% of the exotics out, they just come back. Don't even bother. Don't even bother. You're wasting your time because those plants are going to win the battle. That's a war. You're at a war against these exotics. If you don't take, so basically with the mathematical modeling, you have to take out 70% of your plants in the first year, and in the next year, sort of whatever's left, and by 2 or 3 years, you have about 100% eradication. If you're not eradicating that plant completely, they'll come back. And the moment you turn your back, they're going to be taking over again. You have to be absolutely ruthless. Okay? It's like having a bug, a disease. If you don't get rid of that disease completely, it's going to take over. So you have to, if you want birds in your garden, in other words, you need caterpillars to feed your babies. If you want that, you have to get rid of all your exotics. It's the most unpleasant part of our garden. It's a horrible, thankless job. But unfortunately, if you don't do that, it's like trying to paint a painting on an old canvas. Wasting your time. Making a cake with second-hand ingredients. Doesn't work. You've got to get rid of your exotics and then focus, and then hopefully if we can work towards the few of us that are aware of bringing back biodiversity, if we can have an increased proportion of plants that actually feed biodiversity, we can actually win the war. But it's a collective result. One person's not going to make a difference. It has to be an ant culture. All the little ants have to be all working towards the Queen's instructions, and we need to be able to make a difference. And we can get there. Okay, so let's just quickly see what are exotic invasives. And there are sort of 3 main strategies of dispersal for all your exotics. The one is pods. So your jacarandas, wattles, robinia, oleander, etc., etc., etc. All of those are pods. And the way pods work is they have a very, very strong shell around around the seed. And that seed then can become dormant during hardship. So during drought, fire, whatever, that seed can be intact. And it waits there until the environment is correct for that to grow. Sorry to tell you, the seeds are so good, some of them can last up to 100 years. So if you see a wattle seeding, those seeds that are falling from that tree are there for another 100 years. It makes looking at plants and seed a bit differently. Don't let them seed. If you want to get rid of wattles, don't let them seed. Okay? Same with your jacarandas, same category. Okay? And then what happens is they're typically not dispersed in the wild system when we still had megafauna running, so your buck and your elephants, whatever, eating the seeds. The seeds also, many of them adapted that as it goes through the animal's gut, the acidification in the gut will then break that seed coat, and then they can germinate in the dung because they've got a nice pile of fertilizer, and that seed's got food to get to large size. But none of us eat seeds and go defecate in our garden, so that's not a mechanism that our plants use to be dispersed. So most of the pods in our gardens get into the water systems, and if you go down every single water system in South Africa, I'm talking about 100% of our water systems, every single one of them is lined by these pod-bearing trees. Go to any of your systems, jacarandas, wattles, poplars, blah 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 blah. It's the pods that are being watered down, I think, but also the other one. Then you got your floating seeds. There's not many of them. They fit in the others, and then you got your berries. So your mulberries, syringas, crivets, hawthorns, bugweed, lantana, and they make berries. The birds come and eat them. and then the birds do the job for you. When you want to go for a Sunday picnic, where do you go? To your garden? Do you go to the open grassland? Or do you go to a beautiful river where you can sit and enjoy and then defecate your seeds in the forests? And that's what's happening. So when you have a jacaranda, not a jacaranda, a mulberry, a privet, a syringa, any of those in your garden, what's happening to those seeds? The birds eating them and taking them to the watercourse and destroying the watercourses. When I hear people say, don't worry, we mustn't worry about all the exotics in the urban areas, I'm saying you don't have a foggiest idea what's really happening. We are destroying our water systems. They are gone. They're gone. But we have to have, I wish if I was in government, I would get rid of these plants immediately. And we've got the law to do it, and we can. The laws are in place, but unfortunately people don't understand the consequences. So let's just come back, as I've mentioned this earlier. So what we need to do is get rid of those, focus on those, and the rest, enjoy. Enjoy those. Enjoy them, as long as you've got that, and get rid of those. Then you'll have as many birds, and hopefully chameleons, and hedgehogs, and lizards, bush babies, all of those beautiful insectivorous animals in your garden. And just coming back to pests. Okay, so where do we start? We're going to say start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. It's not about fixing nature over there. You've got absolutely no influence on what happens in Kruger Park. Nothing. But you've got 100% control what's happening in your garden. Focus on that. Focus within your areas of control. And nurseries, you've got huge control. It's actually, if you look around, who grew all the plants that are in our areas? It's the growers and it's the nurseries. You have such a massive opportunity to make a difference. Okay, this is more for nature, for bigger areas. I'm not going to jump over that. Just another way of looking at your garden, and we can help you do this if you really are keen. You can map out your garden, and if we can map out the plants, we can then work out the biodiversity score for your garden, and you can get a score. And who can tell me what will that garden look like in 5 or 6 years' time? What color is it going to be? Red. 100% red. Okay. So what we can do is we can score gardens, and then you can get it and try and get your biodiversity score up. I live in Randburg, and a lot of when I walk my dogs or when I go for a run, I go in either St. Stithians or Delta Park. Delta Park, it's a big park, and so I just score it. When I go in there, my brain thinks biodiversity scores all the time. So if I scored in Delta Park, it'll be like a -3 or -4. Look at it like this. In other words, it's a negative trajectory. If I go there, if humans don't intervene soon, well, it is already there. It's a forest of exotics. Very little. You go and count the butterflies in Delta Park. 5 species. Okay. If you go to St. Stithians, which is used by an equal number of people, so there's 2,000 children who come on the premises every day for school day, and all the staff. So you've got huge amounts of cars, but they focus on getting indigenous plants at St. Stithians. The biodiversity sports score there is probably about a +2. Got a long way to go to get good. I mean, there's a few baddies there. But you can leave St. Stithians' property and you'll get huge number. And surprise, surprise, you've got amazing number of butterflies. Huge diversity of butterflies, huge diversity of birds. They've got bats, boxes, the owls are there. A huge biodiversity. And what a wonderful example that we can live with nature. Isn't that what you want? Going into your garden and hearing the owls, hearing them, seeing all the seeing all the different butterflies, different kinds of bees. And I've done it. I live in a small garden in Santon, on the back end of between Santon and Randburg. And I changed my mindset about 15 years ago. So I changed my garden into a feeding biodiversity garden. Friends now come to visit me. A friend of mine from Australia came a while ago, and he had been to Sacred Bush Run to go watch birds. And then he came to me for breakfast. And he said, if you're there like 10 minutes, give me the binoculars. Where's your binoculars? He saw a bigger diversity of birds in my Santon garden than he did at Sacred Bush Run. Okay, and isn't that fun? And it's gorgeous. And so all I'm imploring of you, I've given you a tool. Turn your garden into a living magnificence where you can really enjoy the life and get the excitement of getting a new form of life in there. It really is fun. Okay, and it brings a different dimension to gardening. I think I've exhausted my talk, but what I wanted to do, I forgot to turn on my Wi-Fi. So if you guys can stand up, stretch your legs in 2 minutes. I need just to attach my computer to the Wi-Fi, and so that I can show you the website I've developed so that you can know what plants to plant. Okay, so I didn't see anyone stretching legs, but okay. So the website that see it's not showing. So I've got to just reshare. Sorry, I'll go back, you know. Anyway, so I've got a website that, you know, computers know when you're talking. They don't listen. And this is not listening, it won't close. All right. Okay, so the website is ecorestoration.coza, and it will open up this website, and very fast if you're using Louis' hotspot. Then if you go on to the background of the website, it tells you literally what I've told you in a different way. But where you can go is the plant selector. So on the plant selector, we've given you all, I've tried to make it as easy as possible. And just to let you know, it's got a long way to go. It was, I am doing this alone. I need help. So any of you retirees who've got spare time, I know retirees are more busy than anybody else, but if anybody can make a morning, a week, or whatever, and help you with this, so we can bring on the plants faster than we have, because this is all done. I'm funded all of this, so and I need help. So let's say you now don't know what you want to do in your garden. You want to now choose a plant. Then what you can do is, you know that you want biodiversity 5, so you now know what a 5 means, okay? So I want a 5 plant, and then I want to be able to say, where do I live? Because there's no point going to choose a plant that does really well in the forests in Kenya, but you're now sitting in a grassland with frost in Boxburg. So you want to now say which biome, and there's a little map here that explains what it is. If you don't know what it is, you can have a look on here, but I'm going to tell you that you're the dark green, which means that we have a freezing cold winter, and that whatever you're going to put there is frost sensitive is going to die, basically. And then you have a dry summer. That's what that dark green means. So let's go and choose it. We are now in a grassland, freezing cold winters, wet summer, dry winter. And then I want to go and choose 5, okay? So I've built it for 5 and grasslands. And here it's given you a couple of examples. The Chiliakuru. And now whenever you see that little lady holding a plant, it means, please help Lynn, she's not coping. Okay. All right. So if you now, let's say we want to now choose Acacia Karoo, you've now chosen this, which happens to be the plant that supports more biodiversity than any other plant in Africa. It supports over 155 different species of caterpillars, and this is why it's always full of birds. And because all the insects are coming to feed in it, it has its gum, it just is a fountain of life. And that's why there's so many birds in it, because they're coming to eat the insects that are on the tree. And the bush babies live on Acacia Karoo because they're eating all the insects, because they actually feed on moths, and they eat the gum as well. So if you want to bring bush babies back, it's not actually too cold. They could actually live where you are if you gave them a nice warm bed for winter. It is bush baby country, as long as you had an Acacia Karoos. The reason they're there, insects, and also they feed on moths at night. So if you want to kill all your caterpillars, then you starving your bush babies. Okay? Otherwise, it's not far-fetched to have bush babies in your garden. Okay. They normally go in an area. They normally survive just a little bit longer than urbanization. As long as there's open areas, there's lots of bush babies and Kruger's in Pretoria still, because they've got the ridges and they've got these areas that are protected, and they're still there. And there's absolutely no reason why you can't have them if you allow your cats not to eat them, and don't kill your caterpillars. So here it gives you a bit of description about. So there it tells you what biodiversity's 4th score it is and why. Because it'll tell you it's frost tolerant, and it'll tell you every why it's good and why it's got such a high score. And then you can go to general information, and unfortunately the formatting here is not great, we hope people fix it, but this will tell you all in a nutshell. So its growth rate is moderate, how big it gets, how long it gets, flower, color, whatever. So in a snapshot, it gives you all the different characteristics you need to be able to choose what plant you want. And then it'll tell you what companion plants, if this needs work as well. If you have acacia karoo, these are really good plants to plant with as well. And then it gives you the caterpillars. Look at that list. All of those are the scientific names of all the different caterpillars that feed on Vigilia karoo. And then it'll give you other associations. So what insects feed in it, what wildlife will come, the primates, large mammals, domestic animals, etc. And then the fruits and flowers, what birds will feed in it. And then it will tell you how to propagate it if it's a positive plant, eradicate it if it's a negative, and then it'll give you the traditional uses as well. Over there. So it gives you almost all the information you want on that plant. And then coming back to the selector, it also allows you to be far more predictive. So for example, you've now looked at your garden and you've noticed that you've got no flowers in autumn. But now what are all your pollinators going to eat in autumn? So now I'm not over concerned about being a 5. I just now want plants that are going to be pollinated in there. I want to feed my pollinators. So in my special features, I'm going to, okay, why don't we also choose some butterflies? So it has lots of butterflies and it's a great nectar source. So I now want flowering in autumn and a great nectar source, and I get a whole lot of different plants. So these will feed all my butterflies if I have them in there, or some of them. If you could select for birds, you select and it'll tell you what time of year you want them, and it gives you the control. So basically, what I'm trying to do with this set here, and it's got a long way to go, is to give the power of plant choice to the gardener or the landscaper or whatever it be. So, for example, let's say you run a nursery school. You don't really want too many wasps and all the nasties. Okay, and what's the point in having moths? Because the kids aren't there with the moths. You want them to be able to see butterflies. So you can now select very specifically, and it gives you the data to be able to control. And I'm a very firm believer in use nature to control nature. And I'm going to answer the question that I know if I put up the question I'm going to answer, most frequently asked question. Well, what do I do with my lily borer? What do I do with what eats my cycads? What do I do with those? And the answer, not from me, from the regenerative agriculture, regenerative biodiversity supporting community, is go back to think, why are they there? Why are you getting a lily borer? And almost always, the lily borer goes where the lily borer is fed. Let me take that back to a different concept. People argue about rats. I need to get rid of my rat. Well, I need to put a rat poison down to kill the rats. Why are the rats there? Because you're feeding them. Not because you're giving them homes, because you are feeding them. Stop feeding the pests, and the pests will die. Okay? So giving rat eggs is you killing a symptom, not the cause. Okay? So the same comes to lily borer. Don't have enormous patches of clivias. And your neighbor also has enormous patches of clivias. And so does their neighbor and the garden, whatever. If you're going to have those enormous patches of food, what are you supporting? Lily borer. Okay? So then so if you had to, so let's just come back to the concept of what will happen when we are all dead and gone. Those clivias are going to be gone. Because you planted too many. Never in nature do you see enormous fields of clivias. Nature doesn't allow it. It's a little patch here, a little patch there, a little patch there, and then you don't feed lily borer. Okay? Same with cycads. Go in nature. Where are cycads? Small patch there, small patch there, small patch there. Very seldom do you get a massive clump. Only in the majority of forests, and those are they not susceptible to pests. So start thinking like nature thinks, and control it. And if you can start doing that, you will have the most magnificent garden. Okay, which won't look like you think it's going to look, but it'll be beautiful. Okay, thanks everyone.